Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the best damn movie-related show on the planet, the John Campea Show. Coming to you from right here today in my office, actually. Brought to you in part by our friends at Mint Mobile. And it is an awesome honor and privilege, as it is every day, to have you, our international friends, gather around as we talk about our favorite things in the world, movies and movie news, TV and streaming, and all sorts of good stuff. Not just giving you our opinions, but giving you information and context so you guys can form your own well-informed opinions, whether they're the same or completely different from ours. I'm joined today, virtually, actually, a little bit differently, by Chris Carr. Chris, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm in such a good mood because I got to walk to a Starbucks and not get on the 101.
Oh, yeah. It's a little bit of a different experience for you today, not driving in.
Yeah,
so for those of you who may not know, I wrote about this in our newsletter a little bit earlier today that Jonathan Voico, producer Jonathan, had to take the day off today. We knew about it well in advance. He was taking the day off today. So we do not have our floor director here. We don't have our producer. So we're kind of, so if there's any technical difficulties today, please bear with us and be a little bit patient with us. So with that down, let's get into some stuff here, shall we? We're going to start with this one. This just came out this morning. I made a short video about it up on the YouTube channel earlier. For those of you who only listen to our podcast, we do have a YouTube channel that we put up some short videos on every day. And that's just called the John Campea. Just go on YouTube and search for John Campea Show. You should be able to find it. Anyway, my favorite show of the year, or movie of the year, I should say, so far is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I think is by far the best movie of the year. And the ratings tend to hold that. It's got a 96% critic rating, a 95% audience rating. It's absolutely unbelievable. And what's even more unbelievable is that this movie cost $100 million to make. Now, you compare that against another film that's in theaters right now, Fast and the Furious, or Fast X, that cost $340 million to make. Whereas, here we go, Across the Spider-Verse, $100 million. But a report came out this morning that talked about brutal working conditions for the artists working on that movie, to the point that over 100 artists left and quit the movie in the process of producing it, citing just basically work conditions. Now, this is one excerpt from a report that came out of Vulture, but I'm reading this via our friends over at Screen Rant. And it said this: 4 sources who worked on Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse say animators were hired in 2021, but had to wait 3 to 6 months while the movie was in its layout stage. This caused a time crunch that meant many animators had to work 11 hours a day, 7 days a week. These conditions lasted more than a year, as some work for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse required 5 revisions for the rendering's final stage. Sources also claim that every scene of the 140-minute movie had to be personally approved by writer and producer Phil Lord. Now, of course, I have no problem with that last part there, but Chris, I mentioned this on the video I made earlier today, you're okay, 11 hours a day. I mean, that's long, but that's not too bad. But you got to put it in context. Most people work about 40 hours a week. And most people, when they get to the end of their work week, they're exhausted, they're tired, they're stressed, they need that weekend. These folks were working 11 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's a 77-hour work week. That's almost double. Imagine working your work week and then doubling that. I mean, that is absolutely crazy. And Chris, one of the other things I mentioned is, listen, we get it. We're in the show business. Making movies can be long hours. It can be intense. But when you're talking 77 hours a week under the most incredible pressure, and this is a creative gig, so your brain is constantly moving at 1,000 miles per hour. It's incredible stress, unimaginable deadlines, and especially when you get to work late because of their previous delays and you get working on late, and now the clock is ticking even faster and harder. I mean, one of the things I mentioned before was that we heard before that, there was all this uproar with visual effects artists being really disillusioned with Marvel because of the working conditions, like high intensity, tight deadlines, long work hours, stuff like that. But we mentioned that, listen, guys, this is not just a Marvel thing. Marvel just happens to be the biggest employer and contractor of high intense visual effects work right now. But believe me, this is everybody is going to be experiencing this. There's more visual effects heavy projects being made, not just for movies, but also for series and television than in any other time in history. And I've said before that actors have their unions, the writers have unions, directors have a union. Animation and visual effects artists, these people who work in this world, they really need a union. Anyway, Chris, you hear about this story, you hear about all this stuff going on with it. Are you surprised? And what's your take on the whole thing?
I'm not surprised at all, unfortunately, especially with that many revisions, really, when it came down to getting this final product out. It's pretty standard. Most people who are in this industry are used to a 12-hour day. But this is the difference when you're a union member, is that if I have a 12-hour day on set, and let's be clear, as an actor, I have the least strenuous physical job on set usually, all right? All the production people are hauling things. They got there before me usually. They're leaving there after me. I at least have a certain designated time I have to be away from set so that I can go home, that I can sleep, that I can eat, I get meal breaks, I get all that stuff. When you don't have a union and you're doing these 11-hour days, you don't have that same turnaround guarantee. You don't have those meal breaks worked in. You are working around the clock, 77 hours. That is brutal. That is rough. Of looking at a screen, of building things, of being engaged and trying to work on something with artistic integrity while you are still doing something quickly. Because usually you can do something fast or you can do it well, right? We usually don't get to do both.
Yeah, when I worked in visual effects, we had a slogan that others have used as well, but the slogan is good, fast, cheap. Pick two. But quite often, the studios want all three.
Exactly. And good luck with that. Right? I hope you get that. You're going to pay for what you get and you're going to pay for the timeline that you get to, right? This also makes me very nervous about the March 29th scheduled date for the third installment of this film, because if it is so publicized that people were having these struggles, and like you were saying, this is not just a Marvel or superhero experience. This is any film, television show, etc., that has this level of, VFX in it. It's a tight turnaround. It's a lot of work. I don't know if we're going to get this movie in the designated timetable that we've been given, especially now that this is public, because people are so much more aware of working conditions now. Earlier in the year, we had all the stuff with IATSE come to light of how horrible production has been for members of IATSE. Now we're having, these issues with actors, writers, etc. And the VFX folks are the last on the line without that union protecting them. So I feel like a lot of these companies are going to have to make some adjustments just because this is bad press. Now, does your average moviegoer know about all of this? Probably not. Let's call a spade a spade. They probably don't know about the ins and outs of all of this. But if we start getting this mixed in to the reviews, to the information that you can Google when you are looking up more information about the Spider-Verse, I think that is going to leave a bad taste in people's mouths. So they really need to kind of organize, get things together, and make sure they adequately hire the right amount of staff. I know so many of these companies are trying to cut costs right now. There's been major layoffs across so many different big names in animation, but maybe we need to reevaluate some of that.
Well, I mean, one of the things that's standing out too, I remember a bunch of years ago when I was working at a visual effects company, the main owner of the company was starting to do some work for visual effects schools, because like the schools are saying, like doing these big publicized things, he goes, you have no idea, guys, in the next 5 to 10 years, the need for visual effects artists is going to go through the roof. And I think there also might be a bit of a shortage of actually really good, skilled, qualified visual effects artists out there as well. So that's probably not a bad field. And by the way, you were mentioning doubting whether or not they could get to this March 29th release date for the next one. According to the report, the movie is still in pre-production. Like they're still storyboarding and finalizing story points. And I don't know how they make that March 29th. I thought before that they would have been already well underway in making this thing, and that, well, if they are announcing March 29th, they're going to be able to make it. But if they're still in pre-production, I think you're absolutely right. I don't know how they're going to hit this.
Because you and I have talked about this before, where it was, it's not a big deal if the voice actors haven't recorded their stuff for the next installment of Spider-Verse yet. The art is key. That's what has to be get in lockdown and everything. This is wild to me that they are this far behind on a movie that's supposed to come out in less than a year. that means they are going to be pushing and pushing and pushing folks. And having that weird 3 to 6 month limbo for their artists did not get them off on the right foot. That took away so much valuable time. And it's truly heartbreaking too, because in this Screen Rant breakdown of everything, they talk about how so many artists as well just stuck it out to make sure their art stayed in the project. Even though they were burnt out and overworked, they want to just make sure that that component of what they did still was there. So you've got so many people juggling their artistic integrity and their desire to be part of this amazing film franchise with truly being overworked to such a point that it's unhealthy. It's dangerous, frankly.
Well, guys, I mean, it's a situation we're going to have to keep our eyes on. I am dubious, like Chris, that they're going to be able to make this March release date at this point without working people 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it sounds like that's not going to fly. Again, I think more than anything, this just highlights a union for these, these production people, these visual effects and animators and stuff like that. I think it's going to have to something that they're going to have to look at in the very near future. All right, guys. With that down, let's get on to this, shall we? Now, there's going to be a little bit of a spoilers given out here for Fast X, but if you are interested in Fast X, you've probably seen it already. And if not, you've probably already heard this information, but I did just want to give a little bit of a heads up there. So, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, it came out, he said before that he was not going to do any more Fast and the Furious movies. Like that was it. No more Fast and the Furious movies for him. And, then at the end, of course, of Fast X, lo and behold, look who it is. It's Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And of course, why not? Why not go to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson? Take a look at this. These are the movies that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has been in the Fast and the Furious franchise. Fast 5 made $626 million. Fast and Furious 6 made $788 million. Furious 7 made $1.5 billion. Fast 8 made $1.2 billion. And the spinoff he did without any of the core members of Fast and Furious, the spinoff, Hobbs and Shaw, made more money than Fast 9 did, made $760 million. A spinoff made $760 million. So obviously Dwayne Johnson's importance to the Fast and Furious franchise is important. And it should be noted that the two films that they've done without Dwayne Johnson, Fast 9 and Fast 10, well, they took significant drops at the box office after that. So clearly he's important. But he said he was never coming back. That was it. I'm done. Never coming back. Well, of course, in the post, Cressy, at the end of the movie, Fast X, lo and behold, there's Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He's come back. Now, then the announcement came that they were going to be doing a Hobbs movie, another spinoff that would bridge the gap between Fast X and Fast X Part 2 or Fast 11, whatever they're going to call it, right? But what would that movie be about? Well, now it looks like we know, because reports have come out that the working title of this spinoff movie, note that we're saying working title, is Fast and Furious Presents Hobbs and Reyes. Now, of course, Reyes is Dante Reyes, the Jason Momoa villain in Fast X. By the way, probably the best part of that movie. I'm not a big fan of Fast X, but it had a few things going for it. Had good action sequences, great fight scenes, but Jason Momoa was absolutely wonderful in the film. I loved it. So if you saw the post scene, you know that it was kind of setting up Hobbs versus Reyes, and it looks like that's what they're doing. Now, what this kind of suggests to me that's interesting is that this probably means that Fast 11 does not pick up where Fast 10 ended, right? Like, this is at that time period that Reyes is probably now going after Hobbs, thinking that Dom is dead. That's my assumption. This is all assumption. This is all pure fan assumption on my part. But it seems like, this whole time period, Reyes is going to assume that Dominic is dead. And then we're going to get the end of Hobbs and Reyes, and then we'll pick up in Fast 11. At least that's my guess. Chris, now you are not a huge Fast and the Furious aficionado. You do not watch these movies, except for Hobbs and Shaw. You did see Hobbs and Shaw. But I mean, you followed the news about, the very, very public, fallout between Vin Diesel and Dwayne Johnson. Vin Diesel basically making a public appeal on his social media that, Dwayne, you need to come back to the franchise. Dwayne very publicly saying no. and all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he pops up in the post-credit scene, and now we're getting another spinoff. Couple of questions for you. Are you surprised that this movie's happening at all? Number two, what do you think about the idea of now shifting focus away from Dante versus Dom and the family to Dante versus Dwayne Johnson's character? And do you think that this will culminate in Dwayne Johnson actually coming back into the main Fast and the Furious movies and appear in Fast 11? Or do you think this spinoff is designed so he can do a Fast and Furious movie without having to work with Vin Diesel again? I don't know. What's your take on this whole situation?
First of all, I definitely don't think this came out of nowhere. This came out of the hierarchy of power at DC did forever change. and I love Dwayne Johnson. I think he's a fantastic movie star. Gosh, I like his tequila. I like everything about him. Charismatic as all get out. But I think that did change his opinion of how he was going to be involved in these films moving forward. I think we had to make a few adjustments, maybe eat a little crow and maybe go, hey, Vin, you and I have had some problems in the past. You're having an issue with this franchise right now. I'm having an issue over here. Why don't we join forces and let's make some money? Because at the end of the day, it is the movie business, right? So I think we needed to just kind of put our egos down a little bit and go, I'm gonna make some adjustments here. Now, when it comes to teaming Hobbs up with Reyes, I haven't seen Fast X, but I've seen the clips of Dante, particularly the nail polish scene.
Oh, so good.
The nail polish scene won me over. I just want to watch supercuts of this guy. I love this character. I think he's so fun, so wild, so out there. And I love this kind of teaming here too. I think you got two golden retriever energy actors. Come on. It's going to be a blast. I feel like they'll be able to play off each other so well. They both have big box office draw. No matter how anyone feels about the Fast franchise, the thing I kept hearing the most about this latest installment was how great Momoa is in it. And I think having him as our focus is really smart. And bringing in Dwayne Johnson, a character who we thought had been retired from the franchise, is a no-brainer. No matter what he's been doing recently, people do go to the movies to see him. He's a movie star. So I think bringing the two together is very smart. Now, when it comes to him continuing on in the franchise itself, I don't know. I do think that's a little up in limbo. I think it is a very smart way of kind of keeping him in the family without having him show up to the barbecues. I think this is what they're mostly doing here is, yeah, he's still part of the franchise. We're just not going to see him that often. And we're going to see him kind of doing his own thing.
I've got a theory. It's a little bit out there. I think Hobbs dies in this next movie. I think he dies in Hobbs versus Dante. I think Hobbs dies heroically to stop Dante from doing something really next level, but he ends up sacrificing himself, and then we roll into Fast 11.
You think Dwayne would allow that to happen?
I think so. I think he would. I mean, if it makes the movie great and it gives him a big send off, and maybe more importantly, it gives him a big paycheck.
That's very true.
He's said publicly he doesn't want to work with Vin Diesel again. Now, maybe that has been, mended and fixed and kissed and made up behind the scenes, but this would be an opportunity for him to do another Fast film, make a big impact for the franchise, maybe make a big impact for himself, and then give him a very clear out from the franchise where nobody has to ask him questions anymore about coming back and why won't you do it and stuff like that. Hey, you know what? At the end of the movie, Hobbs dies heroically. Hobbs is dead. So then again, in Fast and Furious is almost as much of a fake death universe as the MCU is. So
I was going to say, no one seems to be permadead in these movies.
Oh, no. Everybody who's died has come back at some point or another, but it is what it is. All right, guys. Hey, listen, we are going to talk about a couple more things up here. It looks like the Oscars are waging war on Netflix. We've got a trailer now for an amazing looking movie called Dumb Money. That and a few things more. But before we do, we're going to take a quick second here and thank one of the sponsors of our show here today, my mobile service provider, Mint Mobile. We want to thank a sponsor of this video, Mint Mobile. From the gas pump to the grocery store, your utility bills and favorite streaming services, inflation is everywhere. Seriously, make it stop. Thankfully, there's one company out there that's giving you a much needed break. It's Mint Mobile. As the first company to sell premium wireless service online only, Mint Mobile lets you order from home and save a ton with phone plans starting at just $15 a month. You guys know that ever since I switched to Mint Mobile, I've been saving almost 70% a month over my old phone plan. For people looking for extra savings this year, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. By going online only and eliminating the traditional cost of retail, Mint Mobile passes the significant savings on to you. All of their plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone number along with all your existing contacts. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/Campea. That's mintmobile.com/Campea. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/Campea. And thank you to our friends at Mint Mobile for being my mobile service provider and sponsoring this episode of the John Campea Show podcast. All right, guys, with that down, let's get into this, shall we? There's been some tension over the last number of years between the idea of the Academy Awards and Netflix. Like, what do you do with Netflix, right? Netflix has had several films nominated, but the question has always kind of lingered on because traditionally in television history, when a movie has been made that has not gone to theaters, but has rather been made for television, the Emmys cover those made-for-TV movies, right? They have not been eligible for the Oscars. Netflix is not a theatrical company. They put there, now granted, it's rather over a cable, that literally runs into your house. They deliver their show over the internet, but it is for television home viewing, just like TV movies have been historically. So should those movies be eligible for Emmys, since it is for home television, or should it be eligible for Oscars? That has been the debate. Now, they have found ways to allow Netflix films to meet certain criteria. The criteria has been you got to play in at least one of these major markets for a certain number of days, and then you can be eligible for the Academy Awards. And Netflix has done that. But it kind of looks like now the Oscars have just implemented new rules that at least seem to be targeting Netflix, because now they're not just saying you got to play in one market. They're saying you got to play your movie in 10 markets theatrically and kind of really increasing the scope of making your movie theatrical. Now, this comes from the folks over at IndieWire, which is kind of interesting. It says this: as before, movies must open for a 1-week run in theaters in one of 6 U.S. qualifying cities, either Los Angeles, New York, San Francisco, Chicago, Miami, and Atlanta, Georgia. So before, all you had to do was play your movie in one of those cities for a couple of days. That's it. And you could be eligible for the Oscars. But now it's changed a bit. After that, the movie must add an expanded theatrical run of 7 days, consecutive or non-consecutive, in 10 of the top 50 US markets, no later than 45 days after the initial release in 2024. So, Chris, basically what the Oscars are saying now is to be considered a theatrical movie and not just a TV movie, the definition has changed. You can't just go to LA, drop your movie at the Sunset 5 Theater for a couple of days and say, there, we're a theatrical movie now. Now they're saying you got to do that, and you have to play it in at least 10 cities for at least a week, really expanding their definition. Now, listen, we're obviously in an era now of streaming, and the Oscars are trying to figure out how do we adapt to this new streaming model that's out there. And we got to kind of address what makes it a theatrical movie, what does it not. But it can't help but feel a little bit like this is specifically targeted at Netflix. So my question is, we've been talking a little while. I mean, Netflix just put Glass Onion and gave it a limited theatrical run, like a legitimate theatrical run. they gave it. Yeah. And we've talked a little bit about how they could be looking to expand and doing that for some other films. Is this basically going to force Netflix to look a little bit more seriously at a theatrical model for their original films? Or is Netflix just going to kind of go, well, then you know what? We don't need to be at the Oscars. I don't know. How do you see them approaching this?
I do think Netflix is going to keep making that push for prestige. I really do. And it's something, too, that'll make them money. If Netflix is smart, they would have some flagship Netflix theaters where you can go watch Netflix properties there before they drop on their streaming service, because we've seen the data on that. We've seen that helps you make money. Glass Onion brought in money with its incredibly limited theatrical release.
Yeah.
Right. And I know some people, too, think this is kind of a response to the To Leslie debacle from the past Oscars. Now, that film, it would still be eligible and everything because of the way it released. And this mostly applies to Best Picture and everything. I think this would be a good thing for Netflix, frankly. Even though it feels very targeted, I think this is the best thing that could happen to them, because it is going to force their hand, because we've already had the toe dipped in the let's do a theatrical release. Now we're going to have to jump in and start doing it. But then they can do it for their non-prestige films as well. Those big budget action films they do that I think, frankly, should be seen on a big screen. I think this is great, because then they can make back some of their money that they're giving to having all these A-list celebs in there, all these amazing effects things thrown in there. I think it'd be smart. The people I'm worried about with this are independent filmmakers. Those are the people who are going to get hit really hard with this. I was reading about this in the LA Times, and I wanted to read this quote from Melody Kronbrot. She's a publicity executive, and she was saying, "My heart goes out to young filmmakers who might find it hard to get to 10 markets. They're going to need someone to help them navigate these new rules, or else they're going to need a lot of credit cards." Now, that is going to be a very, very difficult thing. And she goes on to say, the fight for space is going to be difficult. So those indie filmmakers, those truly independent distributors and everything, including things like Sony Picture Classics and stuff, I think they're the ones that are going to have a bit more of the struggle here. Because at the end of the day, all these streamers do have deep pockets. Maybe their stock's not always doing as well as they want. Maybe they're not always earning as much. But when you have something like Amazon backing you, Netflix, we've seen an increase in their stock in the past few months, they're going to be able to afford to get these markets. So the indie filmmakers, who I think is really going to suffer because of these new rules, and I think it's going to force Netflix into a model that ultimately is going to do a huge boon for their business.
I wonder, though, about, because I read that same thing about how this might affect indie filmmakers. Yeah. But to be fair, and maybe this is just bad recollection on my part, I can't think of the To Leslie thing notwithstanding, I can't think of a lot of super small indie films that literally only played in Los Angeles for 1 week, to meet the bare release requirements. Yeah. I can't think of any off the top of my head of those movies. Like even Moonlight had a release, like it had a legitimate release, but I can't think of a lot of these really tiny, small, truly independent films that were only playing one city anyway that have gotten Oscar nominations in the past anyway. Or am I not really remembering that correctly?
No, for the most part, in recent years, we've had other big distributors come get them. It's been after they've been festival darlings, though, right? So we're going to have the budgets to go to those festivals and make those deals with distributors. Writers strike outside of this, right? Because that's a whole other can of worms of trying to get that whole studio deal going. A lot of this is what it could affect down the line if we start doing this then with, and I don't think they're going to pursue this as hard, but if we're talking about them taking steps forward and making these rules, for everybody, your short films, your documentaries, those sort of things are going to have a whole other can of worms opened on how those are going to be seen by the public.
Yeah, how does that, that's a really good point you bring up. Like, how does short film, because short films do not get big theatrical releases. How do there must be some other rules for shorts. Like maybe they have to play at a certain number of festivals instead, because you're not going to get a short film playing in 10 of the 50 biggest markets across the US. So there must be exceptions for that. I just think that's an interesting question. I don't know what the answer to that is.
Me neither. I just want to make sure everyone gets taken care of at the end.
All right, guys, with that down, let's move on to this, shall we? One of the most interesting sounding movies coming out to me is this little movie called Dumb Money. Now, it's basically, and I'm shocked at how quickly they were able to get this movie together. It's about the GameStop meme stock that happened, where GameStop was this really struggling stock, and all of a sudden it blew up, like increased 1,000 times and all this kind of nonsense, right? And they made a movie about it, and it's called Dumb Money. Now, what's really cool is when you look at the cast of this movie, let me just scroll down here a bit. So we've got Anthony Ramos is in it, Pete Davidson, Shailene Woodley, Seth Rogen, Clancy Brown, Sebastian Stan, Vincent D'Onofrio. The main lead is Paul Dano, who I think is just one of the best actors working today. Dane DeHaan, who is an actor I felt was going to be one of the biggest, most successful actors in Hollywood over the next 15 years. And then he just kind of disappeared. But I love seeing that he's back in this. Nick Offerman is in this, who I totally adore. America Ferrera is in it. I mean, this is an incredible, incredible cast. And the story of this is so fascinating because basically it's this. You had a whole bunch of the rich in Wall Street that were basically putting shorts on GameStop. Basically, these big rich people in Wall Street stood to profit if GameStop failed, which I think is something that's really messed up in the stock market. Like, you should not have, pre-existing biases to wanting something to fail. I profit if that thing fails. And then all of a sudden, this guy, played by Paul Dano, was able to orchestrate this massive movement of people online to basically meme stock GameStop and drove its profits through, drove its stock price through the roof. That cost these big, wealthy stock market Wall Street guys billions and billions and billions of dollars. Well, they showed us some preview stuff for it at CinemaCon a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. And it looked fantastic. And now they've dropped a red band trailer for it that is now out online. You can go watch it. And Chris, I don't often say this because normally they show us something at CinemaCon and then they release something later. And I'm like, yeah, but wait till you guys see what we saw at CinemaCon. This trailer was even better than the stuff they showed us at CinemaCon. It was unbelievable. I mean, all of a sudden with this trailer, I was already looking forward to the movie, but with this trailer, this movie gets up there into that same category for me as Dune 2, as Oppenheimer. I mean, it's right up there now as amongst my most anticipated movies for the rest of the year. This thing looks insanely good. And I'm a big sucker for these types of movies that revolve around true things we know about every day. And I would be shocked. AMC is going to be a part of this movie as well, because that got caught up in there too. Anyway, you saw the trailer. What did you think about it? What are your expectations like? What are you looking forward to? What are your thoughts?
This is such a good trailer, first of all. It's so good because it succinctly lets you know what this movie is going to be about, because we immediately get that America Ferrera. Listen, there are all these stock bros who would benefit if this fails. So the system's rigged. Why don't we play it? And you know that it's all these people coming together based on this one guy, Paul Dano. And I love the energy of this. I love the graphics they use. I love the meminess of it. I think it's wonderful. What we saw at CinemaCon is a great opener. I was really interested in it then. This gets me even more excited about it. And I'll tell you what, too, before the trailer, I didn't know that Pete Davidson was going to have such a big part in this. And we've talked about my love of Pete Davidson before on this show. I'm so happy to see Pete doing well. Bupkis just got renewed for season 2. I'm really excited for him to build up his body of work because I really enjoy him. And I think the dynamic between him and Paul Dano, because it looks like they're brothers in this, is going to be so fun. I'm really excited to see these two kind of goofy, bro-y guys really pull this off. And it seems like the stakes in this are so high. I know AMC is quaking in their boots about being involved in this. I kept thinking that too, this of, I wonder if we're going to dive into that or if this is going to spawn a whole other movie. But it's got really great Big Short energy. And I think that's what I'm most excited about because I love that format. I think those kinds of movies are so fun. And I love how accessible they make these stories. Of here's how this works. Let me break this down for you in a way that doesn't dumb it down, but it does make it a bit more colloquial. And I'm really looking forward to see all of this come into fruition. This cast, I can't believe they got this cast. It's stellar.
I mean, again, I know we already went through it, but Shailene Woodley, Pete Davidson, who's been killing it. I surprisingly loved him in the new Transformers movie. Seth Rogen, who for me is always gold. Clancy Brown is one of my favorite guys in the business. Vincent D'Onofrio, Sebastian Stan, Dane DeHaan, Paul Dano, Nick Offerman, America Ferrera, Anthony Ramos. I mean, this is a powerful lineup, and everything I've seen in this just looks absolutely fantastic. And I cannot wait. To watch this movie. Really all right, guys. With that all down, we're going to head in now and start taking questions that our YouTube channel members have sent in. As I mentioned, we have a YouTube channel and we have a great group of supporters over there known as YouTube channel members. And we ask them every day to send in some topics and questions that we address here on our show. Now, before we get to those topics and questions from our channel members, though, we're going to take just another minute here and thank a couple of more sponsors to today's episode of our show, the wonderful folks at BetterHelp and Rocket Money. Guys, we want to thank a sponsor of this video, BetterHelp. Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing and changing. Think about it. The person you were 5 years ago is not the exact person that you are today. Therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way that we do until we talk things through. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. And guys, striving for better mental health is something we should all aspire to. I've talked about this before, but when somebody goes to the gym, we applaud them for getting out there to improve their physical health. Well, it's about time that we start looking at mental health the same way, not just by encouraging the people around us to look into therapy, but by also taking the step to take care of our own mental health as well. So listen, if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a short questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Campea today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Campea. Guys, we want to thank a sponsor of this video, Rocket Money. The average person has around 12 paid subscriptions. Think about that. If you think you're only subscribed to a handful of services, you might want to double check. With Rocket Money, you can quickly identify and cancel all of your unwanted subscriptions. Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill, is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. Rocket Money will quickly and easily identify your subscriptions for you so you can stop paying for the ones you don't want and don't even use. Simply find the subscription you don't want and press cancel, and Rocket Money will cancel it for you. No more long hold times with customer service or tedious emailing back and forth. Rocket Money makes canceling subscriptions as easy as the click of a button. My wife Ann and I moved out of Burbank 2 years ago, and one of the first things I discovered when I loaded up Rocket Money was that I was still paying for a gym membership I haven't even been to in Burbank in 2 years. So stop throwing away your money. Cancel unwanted subscriptions and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/Campea. That's rocketmoney.com/Campea. rocketmoney.com/Campea. And thank you to our friends at BetterHelp and Rocket Money for sponsoring this episode of the John Campea Show podcast. Remember, guys, when you go and check out and support our sponsors, you're actually supporting us. So if you look down into the description, you'll find links and promo codes to all of today's sponsors. And thank you again to BetterHelp, Rocket Money, and Mint Mobile. All right, guys, with that down, let's get over to our questions sent in by our YouTube channel members. I'm going to see if I can get this on the screen here a little bit. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this well or not, but I'm going to try. Okay. Yeah, we got it here. First of all, we got Rafael Castillo who writes in, Strange New Worlds not only has great production design, but also blockbuster movie level costume design. I agree. I mean, listen, I don't know if you've watched Strange New Worlds, Chris, but I think it is the best Star Trek we've had on television since Star Trek The Next Generation. And I love Star Trek, but honestly, it is surprisingly great. Now, I knew I loved this cast and crew when they popped up in Star Trek Discovery, and then they gave them their own spinoff show. I have not watched any of season 2 yet. I know they're getting ready to go into episode 3. I only saw season 1 Really enjoyed it quite a bit. Have you had a chance to watch any of Strange New Worlds yet?
I saw the pilot episode, basically the premiere episode,
Right.
and I haven't gone back to it, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun, and I loved everybody on it. I think, to Raphael's point too, the aesthetic is tremendous on it. I think everything looks wonderful.
Yeah,
it
looks
feels
really
like
great.
Classic Trek, but for today.
All right. Next up, we're going to go to Dork of the Ninjas, who writes, "Hey crew, what is your individual favorite scene in the MCU? My personal favorite has to be in Age of Ultron when the Avengers are trying to lift the hammer one by one. That is a great scene. I've got two to mention, Chris. I got two. So one of them is the scene in Infinity War where Rocket and Thor are talking, and Thor is going over everything he's lost. And he says, and I'll kill Thanos. And Rocket's like, and what if you're wrong? And he says, what have I got to lose? I mean, it's one of the best acted scenes, I think, in the MCU. I love that. But I still think to this day, and this is kind of cliche, my favorite scene and sequence is the airport fight in Civil War. I just, that is everything a comic book movie thing should be to me. But if you look back over the MCU, what would you say is your favorite scene or moment in the MCU?
Oh man. I mean, for my stereotypical kind of Avengers moments, it's that first Avengers film as we're seeing all of them take in what's happening in New York, that lovely shot that goes around the crew.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of, are we using our made up names right now?
Oh, that's
that
great.
One always kills me. But lately, I think, because it just destroyed me, is the Florentiefs Go Now from Guardians 3. That moment, I cannot get on top of that moment when it happens. I cannot let it, I'm so shaken by it. And I think it's just a testament to, if I am crying that much over CGI animals, oh, James Gunn, you did something right.
That's so powerful. Okay. Next up, we've got Shibaji writes, "Hey, John and crew, if Nolan decided to come back to Warner Brothers, do you think he could direct a DCU movie? He's the only one who has had any success with critics when it comes to DC films, in addition to James Gunn." Well, first of all, that's not necessarily true. Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman, big success with the critics. Not huge success, but James Wan had decent success with the critics, like moderate success with the critics with his first Aquaman movie. And of course, you already mentioned James Gunn. So there's that. I cannot see Christopher Nolan doing a DCU movie. He's already kind of said he doesn't want to do comic book movies anymore. But even if he did, Christopher Nolan is such a fiercely independent thing. Remember, he did not want his Batman crossed over with anything else. He makes his movies and his stories, and he does not want to have to tie in his thing to anything else at all. And I just don't see it doing. I don't know, Chris, am I being a little bit pessimistic? Do you think Christopher Nolan could do a DCU film?
No, he's been there, done that. And to your point, too, he loves creative control. I do not see him working in a multiverse connected universe with other folks. He's going to want to do his own thing. And he can, because he's Christopher Nolan.
All right. Next up, we've got, Vicog writes, "In an alternate universe where the whole James Gunn tweet situation didn't happen, how would that have affected the DCU and MCU? Would the Guardians have played a larger role in the multiverse saga? Would Henry have stayed as Superman? Thanks for all you do and bring on the filthy." That's an interesting question. I mean, first of all, I don't think it would have affected the Guardians of the Galaxy all that much. I mean, obviously, if the James Gunn, what he's referring to, in case some of you forget about this, James Gunn was infamously fired by Disney out of nowhere when literally a decade-old couple of tweets resurfaced. And then they fired him, and then they later kissed and made up, and then he came back. So one of the big things that would have happened in the MCU is, you got to remember, right before that happened, Kevin Feige had basically installed Gunn as his right-hand guy that was going to kind of help oversee and shepherd the galactic level of the MCU. So that could have had some profound changes in the MCU. Again, I don't think it would have impacted the Guardians of the Galaxy specifically all that much. As far as the DCU, I mean, that thing was already dead. Like, whether James Gunn thing, I mean, the death of, you remember, we've talked about this, none of the last 5 DC films have gotten over $400 million. Think about that. In an era where comic book films are the biggest things at the box office, none of the last 5 DC movies have made over $400 million. And a number of them have made under $200 million, which is preposterous when you think about it. So this whole mess was all independent of James Gunn, right? Like James Gunn is now the CEO of Disney or of DC, but his first movie doesn't come out till 2025. This is all the legacy of failure. And I say failure as somebody who has liked almost every single one of the DCU movies, but this failed. It purely failed. So no, I don't think Henry Cavill would still be Superman. No, I think even without James Gunn coming in, I think Warner Brothers and everything had to acknowledge this thing needs to be rebooted. So I don't think they're being changed. I don't know, Chris, if James Gunn wasn't available, if he had stayed on MCU and became Kevin Feige's true right-hand man over there, and how would that have made the current state of the DCU look any different or different at all?
I don't think it would. I truly don't. I think that regardless of James Gunn's involvement, this has been circling the drain, unfortunately, for a while, because we've seen that we're still in the old DCEU right now, right? We haven't even gotten to what James Gunn has touched. So I think that right there is the proof in the pudding of it hasn't made an impact yet at all. So we'll be able to see what he does with what he's given and what he's able to do here. But all he's been able to say is, I like this movie. Oh, we had to scrap this movie. You know, I don't think he's had a tremendous impact either way right now.
Yeah, well, we literally haven't been able to see any impact of what James Gunn and Peter Safran being there other than announced movies coming in 2025 and beyond. I mean, that's really been it. All right, exactly. Next up, we've got Big Cookie who writes, hey, Ray, can you hear me? Big Cookie writes, finally got around to watching Pinball last night. Solid movie. Thanks for the recommendation, Ray. Not quite as good as Air or Blackberry, but no complaints here. There you go. Ray's over in the studio. They're all happy about that. I know he's been trying to get a lot of people to watch Pinball. You know, I got to get around to watching it myself. All right, KW Garrett writes, other than Spartacus season 1, what is the worst season of a TV show you've ever watched all the way through? Well, let me be clear. Spartacus season 1 is fantastic. It's just the first 3 episodes are garbage. Right? Overall, as a whole, the season's fantastic. Like it got me on board with it immediately in episode 4 and then kept me on for the entire rest of it. And I fell in love with it. The worst season of television that I have watched all the way through. Oh, that's a tough one because once I really detect things have gone south, I will jump off of a show. So watched all the way through. You know what, Chris, for me, it might be Heroes season 3.
Oh,
which is
it was so bad.
Which is hard to say because Heroes season 1, I think, is the best first season of TV. I mean, certainly the series premiere, but that first season of Heroes might be my favorite single season of television I've ever seen. But then the writer's strike happened and so season 2 is a big thing and season 3 was just, they didn't know what they were doing and all the wheels fell off. I don't know. What would you say is the worst season of TV you watched all the way through?
Oh man, this is hard because I try to be an optimist and find things that I do like. Because right now for me, and it's still in it, is Crowded Room, which had such a promising premiere. And now I've just been like, woof.
Which one is that?
Get through it. It's the Tom Holland one.
Oh, right. Yeah, that has gotten not good reviews.
No, and I was really rooting for him. But I mean, one of the worst things I think I've ever seen, and I know you love him and I love him, Mulaney. The sitcom Mulaney was so bad. And it had John Mulaney and it had Martin Short. Like, how could it not be good?
I didn't even know he had a show called Mulaney. Mm-hmm. Have you seen his most recent comedy special?
I have, yeah.
It's so funny.
It's great.
It's uncomfortable because he's talking about his drug addiction, but I thought it was really, I had no idea he did a show. That's how fast it came and went.
It was. And I was like, oh, this will be fun.
All right. Next up, we've got Aaron Epstein writes, after watching The Flash, I went from thinking super speed is one of the best superpowers to being one of the worst. Too many things to be careful of. Calorie intake, touching people, clothes burning up. Oh, and going back in time and destroying the universe. I mean, you know, it's funny. It's been around since I was a kid, but it's still a question that's always brought up in tons of Geek Circle conversations. If you could have one superpower, what would it be? And you're right, super speed has a lot of drawbacks. I think I go back and forth between, you know, invisibility, super strength, invulnerability. I still think I'd go for flight. I think flight is still, and that's funny coming from a guy who's got a fear of heights, but flight I think would be amazing. I don't know, what would you say to that classic question?
Oh, I want plant control. I want to be able to control plants. A
little poison ivy.
Yeah, but I could solve world hunger. I would always have snacks. And then if I did want to kill people, it's so easy to get rid of my murder weapons.
Yeah, it's true. There's nothing in here except a weed, a dandelion.
I just have a ficus. Leave me alone.
All right. Next one up. It's Debat writes, I have little interest in Blue Beetle, but as a fellow good Mexican kid, you can bet I'm watching it opening weekend. Vatos Locos forever. That came up the other day. We were talking about Blue Beetle the other day, and Ray, I said, I really do believe the film's going to flop. And I hate saying that because I think it looks promising. I'm looking forward to watching this movie. But you just look at where the DCU is at right now. I don't think people are going to support it. And Ray brought up the point that, I think a lot of the Latino community is going to go out and support it. And I don't know how much that's true because, like I said, like as an Italian and as a Canadian, you can put up a big Italian production or a Canadian thing, and I'll be excited about that. But if it doesn't look good to me, that's great that it's Canadian, but I probably won't go check it out if it doesn't at least look good to me. So I don't know about that. I don't know. What do you think about that, Chris? Do you think the Latino community that will go like, hey, regardless of how this movie looks, it's the first lead hero we've had in one of these big DC or Marvel films, we're going to go out and support? How do you think that they're going to respond to that?
I'm hoping they respond in the way that Ray's talking. I really, really do. Crazy Dudes Forever. Yeah. I hope so, because to your point too, as a fellow Italian, right? Whenever it is an Italian hero, Canadian hero, American hero, those heroes have always looked like us, right? Like your editorial video recently. So I think having a hero who you haven't seen in a lead role, who you identify with, is a tremendous thing. And, we've seen how communities maybe don't come out for things that don't look great. Easter Sunday is an example. Right?
Oh, why'd you remind me of that film?
I know.
So bad.
But Blue Beetle, I think, looks good. You also have the vote of confidence of, hey, this was supposed to go to streaming, and we went, hell no, this deserves to be on a screen. So I'm hoping that word of mouth and the way the trailers look and everything, I'm really hoping that people are going to go, hell yeah, let's go see this and support it.
Yeah, and I hope it's good. I really do hope it's good. I mean, it's like you said, the very fact that they said, let's take it just from being a streamer to being theatrical release. I thought, again, I don't think the trailers were amazing, but I think they show promise. And I hope they're good. All right, next up, Jacob Hirsch writes, hey team. Saw The Flash last night with my dad. While we thought it was fun, my dad came out still not understanding what Flash's deal is. And I kind of agree with him. I felt the movie skimmed over who Barry is and how his powers work a little too fast. Do you think the general audience's lack of knowing who the Flash is, unlike so many of us who watch your show, may be a part of the film's poor box office? I don't know that I agree with that, Jacob, to be honest with you. I mean, there's not a lot to know about Flash. Barry's, dad went to prison for the death of his mother. He's always lamented that, and he's really fast. I don't know that there was a lot more to get about him. And the fact of the matter is, while I like it when even films in a shared cinematic universe can stand on their own, I think significant people already know the Flash's deal. Like, I go back to the one Hulk movie, right? That I starred in with my co-star Ed Norton Jr. The movie didn't feel the need, even though it was a new movie, they didn't feel the need that they had to go over the Hulk's origins again. Like, you get it. When he gets mad, he gets big, green, and strong. I mean, it was kind of that. And I kind of feel, Chris, looking at The Flash, that even if you didn't watch any of the previous DCU movies, I don't know that I would have felt in the dark about Barry or who he was or what he was about. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I mean, you get it. You get that what his powers are, how it works, his limitations, etc. What I will say to our viewers' dad's point here is this movie is particularly plot driven as opposed to character driven.
Right.
Right. And so a lot of it is reactions to things. And while you do obviously have Barry, who very much wants for his father to be, found innocent of this crime he did not commit, and we have that as a driving force, so much of it is reactionary. Oh, well, this is what I got to do, and this is what a hero would do in this situation, I guess, and grappling with those things, which is what most comic books do. I will say, yeah, you do just kind of get these two flavors of Barry, which, to Ezra's credit, I think Ezra does a great job of playing those two kind of roles and having chemistry with themselves, But I don't think we see a lot of, I don't know, maybe more about why Barry does the things that Barry does. I can see some of that. I can understand that point. I don't think you need too much of that. I think it is pretty apparent of why Barry does what he does. I don't know. I just feel like you probably know more about a Tony Stark. You probably know more about a Bruce Wayne than you do about Barry Allen, given this film.
All right. Next up, we're going to go down to Mr. Hank Dunn, who writes, over under 35% that Mission Impossible hits $1 billion. This is a question that's been coming up a little bit about Mission, because I don't believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe, while there are a lot of people who think it's an automatic, Mission Impossible is going to hit $1 billion, I don't think any Mission Impossible film has hit $1 billion at the box office. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, so I don't think any of them have. Now, the counterpoint to that is Tom Cruise. A lot of people, even though it's completely wrong, are looking at this movie as the follow-up to Top Gun Maverick. And that's how a lot of people are going to look at it. And listen, the movie looks fantastic. Even though I didn't love the first couple of installments of Mission Impossible, I've fallen in love with the franchise. I think a lot of people have. It's big, bombastic. Everybody knows it's, Tom Cruise's reputation for doing crazier and crazier things with the movies that he does. I actually think your line of 35%, Hank, that's right about where I'd put that number. I think it would be right around 35%, because I would not say 50. I certainly wouldn't say anything over 50, but I'll take a push on 35%. That's exactly what I think the chances are that this thing makes $1 billion. I don't know, Chris, what do you think?
No, I think that's right on the money, because you also have, Tom Cruise is so smart and always appealing to exhibition. He's always talking about how he is committed to theaters. He's committed to big screen openings, all of this stuff. And in that commitment, he's also fighting for screen time right now. We've got some big movies opening around the same time.
Yeah.
He's going to be competing with Oppenheimer. He's going to be competing with Barbie. He needs those screens. And that's what Top Gun Maverick had in its favor, was so many screens were devoted to that film. And not only was it, well received and everything, and a great summer blockbuster and everything, but certain movie theaters too were almost dedicated to Top Gun Maverick. And the Mission Impossible franchise is a different animal. Yes, it has Tom Cruise doing amazing stunt work, and it is existing, established IP that people like, but does it have that same kind of delivery and nostalgia bomb that Top Gun Maverick has? Jury's out.
All right. And we got time for one last question today, because we're hitting an hour here. And that comes to us from Michael Kurtz, who writes, halfway through the year and no billion-dollar films, not even close to $1 billion. Is that normal? I feel like we have about 7 to 9 a year. Well, first of all, we have had $1 billion film this year. It's called Mario Brothers. That has made a ridiculous amount of money. I think it's like, last I checked, it's like 1.3 billion. It's the third biggest animated film in cinematic history. Also, we had one getting kind of close. Like Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is going to bump up to about $850 million. So that's been up there too. 7 to 9 a year. I think that's only happened once. I'm not even sure there was a year that had 7. Maybe there was, but I have a feeling that only ever happened once. that many billion. So no, it's not like there's this perception out there, Chris, that billion-dollar films are like finding apples on a tree. They're all the plentiful, tons and tons and tons of every year, dozens and dozens of movies.
There's as many billion-dollar films as there is kryptonite. It's just everywhere. Yeah,
it's just that there's actually it is a limited number of films that hit the $1 billion. I can't remember what the number is at now, but I think in all-time cinematic history, I think it's around 50. I can't remember exactly, but no, you do not get $7 to $9 billion films per year. It, like, might have happened once, but that was probably it. There are still a couple of contenders. Remember, there are still a number of things at play here. We are still in the after effects of the pandemic. Part of the after effects of the pandemic is having crowded release schedules. Because, a lot of films got pushed, a lot of films productions got pushed, which meant a lot of movies are coming out in a smaller space of time and all that kind of stuff. I think there are a few contenders for the rest of the year. Dune 2, remember the first Dune made over $400 million despite two huge things. Three things, really. Number one, Dune is a very confusing property to a lot of the average movie-going audience. Number two, it was still kind of in the pandemic era that it came out. It was in decline at that point, but it was still there. And number three, it was a day and date release that they put it out on HBO Max in the same time that they put it in theaters. Despite all of that, Dune still made over $400 million at the box office. I think it's got to be considered, and went on to win 6 Oscars. I think it has to be considered one of the contenders to break the $1 billion mark. Obviously, we were just talking about Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 with the coming off of Top Gun Maverick. That's going to be considered one of the possibles. Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, I think, has to be considered one of the possibles. I wouldn't put money on it making $1 billion, but it's a possibility. Are there any others that you can think of that maybe have a chance of hitting the $1 billion mark that I'm not thinking of?
Dude, Barbie has the potential.
Really? You really believe in Barbie that much?
I really think Barbie has the potential. It just depends on how this movie is, because you've got nostalgia, and I feel like this movie has all the makings too of like a cult film right now. But to have that experience happen in real time, as opposed to, and we all go see this movie 10 years later. I really think with that cast, with the aesthetic, with the story that we keep hearing about, I think there is a lot of potential, because it looks like one too that can have that Mario appeal of, it does tug on your heartstrings, it does touch on nostalgia, but young audiences, older audiences alike would enjoy it, because you've got generational fans of Barbie. Plus, it's also marketing to people who freaking hate Barbie. So it's targeting everybody.
Yeah.
I think it could do it.
One of the things I love that the director said at CinemaCon, they said, if you love Barbie, this movie's for you. And if you hate Barbie, this movie's for you, which I thought was really kind of cool. And all right, guys, that'll do it for today's installment of the John Campea Show podcast. Thank you so much for being here and making this show part of your day. Big special thank you to our YouTube channel members for sending in those questions. Number one, because you gave us great fun and interesting things to talk about. But number two, by being YouTube channel members, you actually support what we do here, and all of us involved. Thank you guys so much for your support. I want to thank the wonderful Chris Carr for being here. Chris, thank you so much. Where can people find you online?
Oh, you can find me at actor Chris Carr or speakfriendstudios.com to talk all things voiceover.
Thank you so much. And guys, thank you all for being here so very much. We'll be back again on Monday. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our podcast, and we'll talk to you guys then. So until next time, my friends, my name's John Campea. Bye-bye.